one, and go.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, or whenever it is you're listening to our podcast. Welcome back to Who's at the Table. My name is Al. I'm joined again by Chris, Broken
What's
Fire,
up?
Lee
Greetings,
from
everyone.
Gaddis Gaming, and RK.
Hello.
Today's topic was inspired by an article I read from Time magazine. The headline of the article was Black and Brown people have been protesting for centuries. It's white people who are responsible for what happens next. So, my question to you, gentlemen, firstly, is when I think this is more specifically to Chris and Lee, when you entered, these new communities in terms of gaming and cosplay and your miniature painting, uh, as the only people of color in those new environments, are they generally welcoming, or do you find you have to act some type of way to dissuade their fears about you as a person of color?
You
Chris, would you
know,
like to?
yeah, I'll start. Um, the irony about this whole thing, right, is I have a white wife, right, and Lee has a white wife. I guess it's different if we're with our wives or not into these environments. If I go into one of these environments, like I went into a new store a few months ago, I was painting some World War II miniatures for Lee. They looked at me, and you could just tell on their faces, like, "Who the fuck is this, and why is he in here?" You know what I mean? But if I go in there with my wife and kids, it's different. Like, oh, maybe he's a family man, and they just want to try some new stuff out because he's got kids. You know what I mean?
Mm,
I think you actually there is a different response if you bring for me, my loved one with me. Also, it matters how you dress. If you dress like you're from the hood, you're gonna get treated like you're from the hood. Um,
so essentially, it's their comfortability with their whiteness and your blackness.
yes, and
Okay.
that's my perspective. Being young like I am, and I've been going to hobby shops since I was 14. Once you get comfortable in a hobby shop, once you get comfortable in a hobby shop, I think it's a lot different because like 19th century miniatures, they opened up a hobby shop. I met with them when I was like 18. I'm going to be 31 in December. They know who I am when I come in, and they know what I is. But your first impact with a person of color in a hobby shop in a venue, I think it's a lot different. I go to a lot of conventions. I think Lee went to YomaCon one year. YomaCon's in Detroit, a lot of black people, so you're not treated different. But you go to something like Adepticon in Chicago, not a lot of black people.
Mm, okay. Okay. And Lee, your experience.
Lee.
I don't know if we lost Lee or not.
Did
Can
we
you hear
lose
me?
Lee?
Yep, now
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can
we
hear
can
you.
hear
Okay.
you now.
I'm sorry, I had my mic muted. So your mileage may vary. So my experience started off in neighborhoods with kids, right? So it was white kids that was playing. Like the guy who taught me D&D at 8, he was 21 years old. He was in college, when he started playing, right? So I was always hanging around with older people, and me and my dad started building like model airplanes when I was 10. So going to the hobby shop was always been an experience, but the predominant culture has always been through the lens of white culture, right? There's never, like, even living in Detroit, um, there was a place called Mock Kid Shop that was owned by a husband and wife, and they were black. So I didn't have the experience of, or I didn't have, there was a dichotomy. Like, depending on where I lived at the time that I was gaming, depended on whether or not it was mostly white people or there was a mixture of black people. So even in Detroit when I was gaming, you know, there was always a group of white kids that played with us, right? And then when I lived in Florida, it was all white kids. I was literally the only black kid, that was playing. So so when I got older and got into the business on the business side of it, not just going to conventions for my own entertainment, but going to the conventions for business, the reaction was one that was like curiosity, like what is he doing, what is he selling, and I went to Adepticon. I think the year I went, it was 4,000 people there, and you could literally count on one hand the number of black people that were there, and two of them were me and Chris. you know, and then there was a small group of Asian people. There was probably more transgender people there than there were people of color. So, so when you look at that environment, it lends itself to that type of jaundiced view of what are they doing here? What are they doing intruding on our world? Do they know the hobby and respect the hobby? Now the other side, like for example, I went to go buy some foam, carrying case foam, and I stood in line at one of the vendors. And literally, like the person in front of me ordered their foam. I was next in line. I went over to order. They literally looked at the next person behind me, took their order, and just ignored me. So I went over to their competition and I bought $600 worth of foam. And then they saw me in the hallway when they were taking a break, and they came back over and they like apologized for ignoring me. I'm like, well, it's too late. My money's already spent.
It's too late.
Yeah, it's too late. But they did later on reach out to me and was like, look, we're really sorry, we ignored you, blah blah blah, And I'm like, yeah, well, it happened, So your mileage may vary depending on who you're dealing with. Now, the next year when I created the Tabletopper product and I debuted it at the Michigan GT, again, I was there as a vendor, and I was just looking at everybody's armies, everybody's painting. Some people were very friendly, and tournament players are very different than your average gamer, right? Tournament players have a very serious focus. They're all about winning at all costs. There's no giggle room at all with them. And I found that was very interesting, where we were just running demo games where people who, like Chris, who have families, just want to drop in and play. We were running those type of games, and then experiencing people who were armies that were min-maxed with their points, every inch counted to whether or not they won. That's a very different type of gamer. So that experience, they may seem like they're standoffish, but they're not. They're like that to everybody. And now to the other extreme to that is when I was at a convention in Michigan, and a guy asked me if I wanted to play the War of Northern Aggression. And I was like, and I knew what the term meant because I went to school in the South. And I was like, really? We're in Michigan and I have to deal with this crap? So for those of you that don't know, to everybody else in the country, it's called the Civil Wars, where the North fought the South. But if you're in the South, it's the war where the North tried to impose their social justice warrior points of view on peaceful Southerners that just happen to be abusing their property or taking away property rights. And those property rights just happen to be attached to black bodies, right? But they want to argue around that inconvenience and talk about states' rights, and property rights, and ignore the fact that the property that they're trying to fight for is black bodies, right? And then I was going to the parking lot to get something on my car, and I look, and the guy had a rebel flag sticker on the back of his car, and I'm like, well, I know exactly who's running the game, or Confederate flag sticker on the back of his car, and a license plate of the same. And I'm like, so you have to deal with those type of people too, because you're dealing with people who come from that community, right? These are people who are at this extreme, have an axe to grind and use the gaming community, which is predominantly white and male and old in historical games, as that community, that they can bitch and moan and gripe and find alike people to do that with. And when people like me and Chris show up, that upsets that apple cart, right? It's not a homogenous environment anymore. You can't say the outrageous shit you can say in a room of just old white guys, right? That aren't going to call you on your bullshit,
Yeah.
And so my experience is to instead of fight against those people and to focus on those people, is to create games that are more inclusive. And so for the last 6 years, our games have skewed more having more women playing with us, having more people of color playing with us. Why is that? Well, that's because we make them feel more welcome at the table, right? If you're playing with just a bunch of people who don't care about you, who don't understand your struggle, and aren't sensitive to the things that fly out of their mouth, and feel entitled to impose their point of view on you, then you have a very different experience at the gaming table when you're gaming with people who are like-minded, who want you to be there, who like the fact that you're bringing diversity and a different point of view to different topics and subject matter, right? So that's why your mileage can vary, because the black people aren't a monolith, gamers aren't a monolith, but you have to be careful of those type of people in society, and you have to be careful of those type of people at the gaming table.
unless I've known the person for long enough and we've been playing for like months now. But otherwise, I keep things in the game. I only talk about game stuff. So when these personal matters start getting brought up, I don't get offended easily. I think of myself as having thick skin. Um, so I can easily brush a lot of things off. Right. And also I understand like, people will be bantering and making jokes and whatever the case may be. So I shove a lot of things, to the side. Um, and I think the only time I've only had altercations maybe like twice, where I remember I matchmake with this one guy and we were playing Apex. And I don't know, but it was like around the era where, I don't know, Trump did something. And this guy that I was playing with, he was an avid Trump supporter. Like you could sense it from the way he spoke and like just the things that he was saying. He was like, Trump is trying, and he was talking positively about Trump, right? So then obviously the question came up about like, where am I from? And I was like, I'm from South Africa. And he's like, oh, really? And I'm like, yes, I'm from South Africa. And he's like, huh. So do you guys just hate white people that side? I'm like, whoa, sir. What? Where did that come from? He's like, no, because I see on the news all the time that you guys are burning white people in the streets. And you guys are trying to take their homes from them. So you must hate white people. So do you hate me because I'm white? I'm like, first of all the information you've been receiving is wrong.
I'd like to interject for a second. A lot of people don't know this, or they're not knowledgeable, but our equivalent to the civil rights movement happened 20 years for you guys?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, essentially, yeah.
I didn't live through the civil rights movement. My mother and my grandmother did. So that's where I get my history from. But you guys are old enough to have a general idea of what happened during that. You were there.
Well, we were born just sort of towards the end of the beginning of our democracy. But we have our parents to tell us how they grew up and that sort of thing. So it is still very fresh and very recent.
Yeah, so like I was saying, so he asked me, and I was like, first of all, the information you're getting is wrong. None of that is happening. There's not a fight going on between black and white, and I think what made it easy with him was the fact that he was willing to listen. Because like after I told him that, he was like, oh, so then what's really going on? Because what I'm seeing on the news, if you're telling me that's not true, what's really going on? And, I think the reason he was willing to ask that is because I didn't attack him straight away. I didn't come at him like, what the fuck, bro? I don't want to play with you anymore. I was like, no, listen, this is not what's happening. And, we engaged in a conversation back and forth about what was going on in our respective countries. I asked him, like, why he's a Trump supporter. And I asked him, like, the whole gun laws and how the electoral college works. And he explained that to me. And he asked me questions about apartheid and what's going on right now and why this taking the land back has become such a, powerful movement in South Africa. And I explained that to him. And it was like an educated back and forth of, we weren't attacking each other. We were just trying to learn from one another, And for me, I thought that was very positive. And like, that was one of my experiences of like that initial attack. And obviously, my second experience was when you guys were all with me. Remember when we were playing Ark with Wildcard?
Before you get to that, just a quick side note, LFG, for anyone who doesn't know, is looking for and what else was there? Go ahead.
Yeah. And my other experience was with a friend of ours, and we were playing together, and he was having an altercation. We could hear it over the mic that he was having an altercation with his mom.
One second, before you tell the story, let's give some background. So I met him like a year before I met you guys, right? So I've been friends with him. So this came to a shock to me when he said these things or whatever, because I had no clue he was like this. So, and then RK, L, and me and him became good friends. We played this game. We played Ark together. We were really jamming out. But So we've been playing with this guy for like 6-7 months at this time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now you can continue real quick.
Okay. Yeah. So, you could hear over the mic that he was having an altercation with his mother about the George Floyd incident and about the riots that were like coming up. And then, you know, we asked him, is everything okay? And is everything fine at home? Because this is a guy we've been playing with for a long time. And then from that, he started getting, you know, angry and aggressive, and he had his negative views. I'm not going to say what he said, but he had his negative views, and he was coming from a very, you know, hateful manner. And for me, I've always taken the approach of, if you're going to come from that hateful manner, if you're going to attack like that, if you're going to not even willing to listen to the other side, like the situation that I had with the one American guy that I met months before the story I just told, if you're going to come at me like that, with that kind of anger, I'm going to just take myself out of the situation. And that's exactly what I did. I'm not going to, I've never believed in fighting with someone that refuses to change. And I'm not going to batter my head against a wall that's going nowhere. So those are my experiences, and that's how I deal with them. I am never going to fight with someone I don't even know. I don't know their experiences. I don't know what they've been through. I don't know what's going on in their daily life. I have no idea. But I am willing to educate. I am willing to learn from them, and I'm willing to give them my side. But it has to be an open conversation that we are both willing to have. If you're just going to attack me, and if you're just going to come from an ugly manner and anger, then I'm taking myself out of that situation, because I don't need that at all.
So actually a perfect way sorry about go ahead, Chris.
Oh, so what I wanted to say is, because what this whole podcast is about is having an open conversation on how we feel. Now, what I think people should do is, if they want to listen and they want to ask questions, they should drop a comment in the comment section, and then we can answer them on the next podcast.
Absolutely. But yeah, just to segue back into the main topic of today's episode. So and I'm gonna reference the anime community here. Do we have Lee back? Is he back?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, glad.
Technical difficulties.
No worries. Just to reference the anime community here, because the way that it's so homogenous, right? It's their stories that they're telling about themselves. So as someone coming in from a different culture, different background, when you come into a new space, you know, you're the one who is bringing your voice and your story and your traditions, your culture, your history into this new medium. So my now query to you gentlemen essentially is, when we're discussing responsibility in essence, when we have cases like with RK's second story, when you have cases like that, on whose head does it fall to be the educator, to be the one to say, hey, this is what people are going through, this is what you need to know?
So I actually have a good there's a YouTube series called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, right? Mm-hmm. And essentially it's a black man that goes through, and he's a very educated man. He goes through his personal experiences and what the research he's done to answer questions about race in the general world. And that's kind of what we want to do here. But the issue is that we're taking a facet of it. It's not just generalization. It's in the nerd community, because most nerds are socially awkward, or, you know, they have their tics. There's something that's drawn them to this community where they can feel accepted for being them. Correct?
Chris, now, wait a minute. Are you telling me that as a grown man playing with toy soldiers that I'm not accepted in this group?
No, I'm saying that you're part of the community because there's something about the community that is drawing you.
I think you just outed yourself, Billy.
But
that's the point that I'm making, is that you're into a very specific hobby, right? That crosses a couple of age groups, right? You know, you're modeling, you're painting, But when you get older, you're collecting armies and you're still going out and you're playing, right? So that's a very nerdy experience, right? That other people may look down on you who are like fanatics about ball sports, right? Whether it's football, baseball, soccer, whatever, then your sport.
Mhm.
But if we look at how we as Black people have another layer of acceptance that we have to look at, is that number one, we walk into the room, we are in Black bodies. People automatically have a reaction to that before they know what you're into, right? So first you have to get past that whole, layer of it before you can sit at the table and start playing. Now in video games, it's different because you can be a little bit more anonymous about who you are, right? If you have diction or an accent, people may not know you're Black right away. And they can't see you, right? But when you're at a tabletop game, it's a social contract that's being laid out between you and the person that you're playing with. And their reaction to you is based on race, gender, and maybe even religion. If you're a Sikh and you're wearing a turban, so I think that the approach that we have to take is different based upon all of those factors, right? So as a Black man, I walk into a room, I can't change the fact that I'm Black, and I can't change the fact that I'm a male. But what I can do is moderate what my reaction is going to be to some idiot who's a Proud Boy Trump supporter, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing I would do would be to approach the organizer or who's ever running the convention and say, if it's a negative response, get them involved, because it's not my job to confront this guy. It's their job to make me safe in the environment that I'm in. And I know if I did anything as a Black man, I'm going away in handcuffs, right? But if the organizers do something,
I'm sorry, no, they don't
do.
They don't do handcuffs. You're on the floor. You're dead. I know they don't.
Yeah,
no, handcuffs are for white people.
Yeah, we jump right over.
Handcuffs are for white people. Guns are for the Blacks. No, you're getting a bullet, sir.
Yeah. So 2020. Yeah, the bullet.
Yeah.
So those are things we have to take in mind. So when I go somewhere, I am unapologetically Black because that's something about myself I can't change, nor do I want to change. But my reaction to other people in the environment is based on knowing that they will get treated differently than I get treated.
Okay, so not necessarily walking on eggshells, just being self-aware and I suppose aware of your environment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It does feel the great civility of the situation lies on us so much more than anyone else.
I think why I would say it does lie on us more than them is something that Trevor Noah said when he was talking about the whole incidences with the police and Black people. And he said this one speech where he was like, for white people looking at this, right, it's hard for them to understand, because for white people, when they call the police come and help. When they call the police are doing their job. They are never in situations where they're like taken and thrown down to the floor or pulled out of their car or shot at. So when we say to them that this is what's happening, their immediate reaction, because of how they've been raised and what they've been gone through, is you must have done something wrong. There's no reason the police would have acted that way if you didn't do something wrong. It's not that they're saying that because they're being racist. They're just saying that because that's how they grew up. And that's how they have been raised. They don't know the differences. They don't know the nuance. So, but that's something that Trevor Noah said. And I thought that was like an important point, because now we are living in an era where information can be put out there more easily. it's easier now to see information. It's easier now to get information. It's easier now to find out more about these stories and get your own education on it. But I think it's also on us to educate anybody that is willing to hear it and say that, hey, listen, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm not trying to say that you were in this situation or that you did wrong. But I am trying to open your eyes to the fact that there are some fucked up shit happening out there. Like, we are not being accepted, we are not being represented, and people are afraid to put us in the light. And this is a conversation that I just want to have with you. I'm just trying to have a conversation with you. I'm not trying to attack you. I'm not trying to say that you are wrong. I'm not trying to, get the police after you. All I'm saying is that, can we talk? Can we have a discussion, the two of us, about our experiences and what we've been through, and try to have an understanding?
Chris, just a quick question. Is there a language bleeper on this thing? I don't know what the podcast is rated, but RK's language is incredibly foul, and I don't know what we were going for.
Why are you coming for me, bro?
I don't know what age range we were going for, but this man he's off the rails with his language.
He's off the rails.
So this podcast is
Did you not say?
I would say this podcast isn't built for a specific age group. It's built for people that want to listen. You know what I mean? And who can have the maturity to take this information and disseminate it into some sort of knowledge or something like that, instead of just throw a shit fit. I don't want to see a bunch of people going, oh, look at these, people just complaining and bitching. If you're interested in the topic and you want us to have a conversation from our personal experiences and the knowledge that we bring to the table, ask that. But don't.
Also, Chris, there might be a young 8-year-old black kid that wants to get into the hobby, and this could be, a primer for him, right? This could be an educational experience for him. This isn't just for people who aren't black to understand what our experience is, but also for other black people in the nerd community who maybe experience the same thing, or may want to get into the hobby but had a bad experience.
Essentially,
I'll give you an example. In the early days, I had my friends, when 40K first came out, wanted me to get into 40K, and I was like, no, this is like complete fascism. I mean, there's a bunch of neo-Nazis on the box cover with their crew cuts and their blonde hair and blue eyes and fighting demons. Where do I fit into that? Right? It's not until 8th edition came out that I even read a 40K book that said, there's 1,000 Space Marine chapters, make one your own, do your own thing. And I was like, why was my friends telling me that I had to fit into this really narrow, grimdark future of all white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed guys? Because that's not what the book says. So my experience dealing with my prey group turned me off from playing 40K, not necessarily the game of 40K.
Yeah.
So funny.
No,
if I had
by
a
all
more
means, if
accepting
you don't,
play group, I would have had a different experience.
So funny story about this, right? There's two caveats I want to make, comments I want to make to that. So this is sort of like having the talk with a lot of black parents have to their kids about walking down the streets, right? Don't wear your hood up. Don't have your hands in your pockets. Don't try to pull your cell phone out. It's yes or no, sir. But in the hobby community. And the other thing is when you're talking about books in 40K and representation, I was talking to Lee a couple weeks ago how we're 500 and some Warhammer books in, and the first all-black Imperial Guard regiment is in this book. And then we want to do research on it on the Lexicanium online, and it says they turned traitor. And I'm like, what the fuck? They're super loyal. I'm reading the book. I'm listening to the book. And I'm like, why are they super loyal? But they don't have any colors. They come from the continent of Africa. You know what I mean? And I'm listening to this, and it's just, they demonize. So instead of like being in a normal Imperial Guard regiment where your sergeants and officers command the companies and everything, they have that, but then they also have these like enforcers that enforce the imperial rule over these black people that are nobles, and they kill them if they say, "Hey, I don't want to be here," or "Hey, if they have some belief that doesn't fit in their. So what they pretty much did is they took this all black regiment and they put these overlords on that kill them,
And they put them in slavery. They did antebellum South.
Essentially, yeah, they enslaved these people, and they indoctrinated them like, hey, if you don't accept what we think, if you don't accept our rule, then we're going to kill you.
Yeah. No, if by all means, if you want this to be more childlike friendly, then yeah, because I'm just taking from the advice of last time when we were speaking. Obviously, I was trying to be a little bit more, laid back and calm down and chilled. And then you guys are the ones that told me that, nah, man, you must call them your oppressors. This is easygoing chats. This is like you're chatting with your friends. So if it's not that, then by all means.
To bring it back to the discourse, general topic of the podcast episode. So just to counter your point, RK, about educating the other side. So I read an article recently, for the life of me, I can't remember which publication it was, you forgive me, but it was an interview of a bunch of authors of all ethnicities. And a lot of these authors, the conversation was about writing for the other. So the other was anyone outside of your own race, ethnicity, culture, so on and so forth. And a lot of these authors said that, it's not something to take lightly, certainly not. You do have to put in the legwork because you want to represent these people in the right way. A lot of them made mistakes in their early works they wish they could, take back now and do differently. But that is the point that I'm asking to you, gentlemen, is if these artists, these creators, if they can go out and do the work for themselves and educate themselves about different ethnicity and different race, what's stopping Mr. Jack Smith on Xbox Live from educating himself?
Nothing.
Nothing. But we also don't know. What altercations that those authors might have had.
Look, there are a bunch of authors with different ethnic backgrounds. Some are from America, some are from Africa, all different ethnicities. So yeah, it's hard to pinpoint an exact.
Yeah, like we don't know if one of them might have spoken to a black guy, and that black guy might have told him something that he might have not known, and then that might have sparked the flame of, damn, I need to do more research. That's all I'm saying. All I'm saying is that I'm not saying that go out there and try to educate every single white man you come across, but I'm saying that if you do have,
opportunity.
If you do have an opportunity, if you do have a situation, right, where you are gaming with someone, and he says something, off the cuff, thinking that it's either just funny or,
it's 2020. There's no such thing as off the cuff. You're wrong or you're wrong.
No, that's what I'm saying. But that's what I'm saying. If he's saying something that is wrong and is, shouldn't be said at all, I don't think there's nothing wrong with us saying that, hey, listen, you shouldn't have said that. And then the next conversation should be, why shouldn't I have said that? And then it's a conversation of, this is why I feel you shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, that's not cool because...
Exactly, because I think a lot of the time when those things are said, like, if I'm gaming with someone, right, and some white guy says nigga, and and a lot of the time what happens is you'll find that most gamers either keep quiet and say nothing, or leave the party. So now that person gaming is like, it's okay for me to continue behaving this way.
So because you're allowing it to happen.
Yeah, you're allowing it. But if you then are gaming with someone and he says nigga or he says something hateful, and you say, hey, listen, I'm not comfortable with you saying that, and this is why I feel this way. And if he's willing to listen, then you have the conversation. But then if he comes through with an attack, then you're like, there's no need for this. I was trying to have a conversation with you. If you don't want to have the conversation with me, if we can't have an educated conversation, then let's just go our separate ways.
This circles back to the social contract that I talked about earlier with tabletop gamers, right? Because I'm sitting
Yeah.
across from you, and you can't get away with stuff that you can get away with when you're playing online, right? You can't
Exactly.
rage quit when I'm sitting right across from you.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so if you don't have the common decency to give me the respect that you would give any other gamer, then where do I start? You know, where do I start to have that conversation? You know, do I have an opportunity to have an educational moment? Maybe not. You know, because you're already believing what you think. You think that black people are, you know, the N-word. Then I have, you know, where do I go from there? You know, I've shown you that, you know, we have things in common because I'm playing this game with you. You know, but if you're not gonna treat me with the respect that you would treat anybody else, then what do I do with you?
Hey, ain't that the truth? But I think it comes down to the situations that you're in. Obviously, it's not always going to work, sadly, because you know this is the world that we live in.
Yeah, 2020.
Well, so my question is too: is when do we take responsibility for our own stuff? Because we're saying that these communities need to be welcoming to us. When is it that we need to make the community ourselves and say, "Hey, everybody's welcome to our community, but we're primarily a black community." You know what I mean?
That actually brought me to a topic that I wanted to speak about on our next podcast of the next time we do this. Is I wanted to discuss the fact of why, especially in the black community,
Maybe actually,
why do we
how are we
always
running
say,
on time?
huh?
Just to interject there, how are we doing on time?
We have like 22 minutes left.
22.
No,
okay.
I'm lying. 12 minutes left.
Oh, 12 minutes. Well, with
Well, you have to keep going because I disconnected. So.
Oh. Well, with that then, Lee, do you wanna tell us that story of that young man who's explaining your tabletop game that you recently brought out?
Sure.
And then we'll wait for RK's thing on the next
next one.
Yeah, no
We'll
problem.
go there. But I think that when we create the environment, then we're responsible for it. But if we haven't created the tournament or we haven't created the gathering, it's on the onus is on the person that created it to police it. And
I agree with you.
A tournament organized by black people.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one.
Because we're participating in other people's events. You know, I haven't seen a black convention. You know, I haven't seen a black nerd convention. And I don't know if black people would even go to one.
So let's be honest. You get a black nerd convention together, there's going to be cops out there. It's just like the protest of the Black Lives Matter. White people can show up in the fucking Lansing with guns, and black people can have a peaceful protest and get shot at.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
He ain't lying.
You get 4,000 black people together in a hotel, and it'll be all over the news.
Aren't there gun conventions?
Man, that's a weekend.
Yeah, but they're run by white people. There's no black gun convention. I guarantee you.
Of course not. Oh, can you imagine? No, I can. It would just be a bunch of black killed men.
It was just dead black people.
Yeah, it would just be a bunch of dead black people. I can imagine it. I can see it now.
Just to tie everything up with a little bow here. So we're concluding that the spaces that we enter, environments, communities, cons or whatever it is, that are not our own, are not organized by ourselves. It is not it's not our responsibility to police it.
It's not.
No.
Absolutely not. Okay. But when we
it is our responsibility to be good ambassadors for the gaming community that we represent. So I represent.
And I think it's also our responsibility to make them aware.
Of what?
The organizers. To make the organizers aware of. So like what Lee was saying, if you are now playing with someone that is gonna come at you negatively and gonna come at you in a racist tone, then, as Lee said, go to the organizers and make them aware of, hey, listen, this is what's going on in your convention.
I mean, fair enough.
Mm.
We can conclude that. Can we conclude there, gentlemen? Does that feel all right to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does everybody feel that the message has been made plain?
Broken.
Everyone feels good. I
Broken.
think Chris is muted there, but if you do have any comments, questions, welcome
I am
to
here.
put them in the comments tab, and
Oh, right.
we'll certainly look to answer those on the next episode. Our podcast is sponsored by Gaddis Gaming. Check them out on YouTube at Gaddis Gaming. That's GADDIS. Check out their Kickstarter, Empire's Fall, I believe it is.
Yes.
That's the one. GaddisGaming.com. Also their website. Check that out. Thank you guys for joining us. Tune in again next time.
I thought we had an interesting conversation.